Miguel lives a quiet, modest life with his mother Rosa on the outskirts of Mexico. One afternoon, everything changes when Rosa receives a frantic phone call from her brother, Carlos. He tells her he is being hunted by a cartel after stealing a large sum of money. Desperate and terrified, Carlos begs Rosa to retrieve the hidden cash and flee Mexico before it is too late. Not long after the call ends, Carlos is captured. The cartel leader, Mauricio, goes through Carlos's phone and sees Rosa's name as the last contact. Without asking questions or investigating further, Mauricio assumes Rosa knows where the money is. Carlos is executed without mercy. Across the border, Jim, a former Marine, lives a lonely life on a dry ranch in Arizona. His days are spent tending livestock and guarding his land. Whenever he sees people crossing the border illegally, he reports them to Border Patrol and keeps his distance, never getting personally involved. When Jim returns home one day, a bank representative reminds him that he is 6 months behind on his payments. Every bit of his savings was drained by the medical bills of his late wife. Now he is drowning in debt and facing the loss of his land unless he can pay it off within 90 days. Jim asks for more time, insisting he is not someone who runs from responsibility, just a man trying to survive. He looks for work, but his age shuts every door. He tries selling the rest of his livestock, only to be offered prices that barely make a dent in his debt. Exhausted and defeated, Jim spends the night drinking at a bar. The bartender, who knows him well, feels sorry for him and calls Sarah, Jim's stepdaughter, who works as a Border Patrol officer. Sarah listens as Jim vents about the land and home he is about to lose. As the night wears on, she cuts him off, then drives him home. Meanwhile, Rosa and Miguel continue fleeing through the countryside. By the next day, they reach the area near the U.S.-Mexico border. As cartel vehicles close in, they spot a narrow gap in the steel fence and attempt to slip through before it is too late. At the same time, Jim happens to be nearby and is startled when he sees a woman and a young boy trying to cross the fence. Realizing they have been spotted, Rosa panics and desperately begs Jim not to report them to Border Patrol. Before anything else can happen, Mauricio and his men arrive. Mauricio immediately demands that Jim hand over Rosa and Miguel. Seeing the weapons in the cartel's hands, Jim understands that turning them over would be a death sentence. In a reckless but decisive move, Jim chooses to fight even though he is alone. He shoots one of the attackers, then escapes in his truck with Rosa and Miguel inside.
Give it to me! Get the truck! Move!
Mauricio and his men chase them relentlessly. When they get close, Mauricio climbs onto the truck and tries to take control, but Jim manages to knock him off and keep driving, leaving the cartel behind. This is where everything changes. This is the marksman. Not long after, Mauricio realizes that the man Jim shot was his own brother. From that moment on, everything changes. This is no longer about stolen money. It becomes a personal mission fueled by revenge for his brother's death. As they flee, Jim notices that Rosa's condition is getting worse. She has been badly shot, her breathing is shallow, and her strength is fading. With the little energy she has left, Rosa hands Jim a small piece of paper with an address on it, along with a dress belonging to a relative. She begs him to take Miguel to that place and warns him that the cartel will kill the boy without hesitation if he is caught. After delivering her final plea, Rosa dies. That night, police officers and paramedics arrive at the scene, including Sarah. Once she understands what truly happened, Sarah suggests that Miguel stay temporarily at the border station for his own safety, with plans to send him to a foster home the next morning. The following day, Jim wakes up inside his truck near the border station with his loyal dog Jackson lying beside him. Nearby, he notices a vehicle he recognizes as belonging to the cartel. Inside the truck, Jim finds Rosa's bag filled with cash. For a brief moment, he considers using the money to pay off his debts, but the memory of Rosa's face stops him. Remembering Rosa's final promise, Jim heads straight to the border station to see Miguel. There, he is told that Miguel will be handed over to people claiming to be his family from Mexico. Something feels wrong. Jim looks outside and recognizes cartel members waiting nearby. Staying calm, he asks for a moment with Miguel, then quickly leads him out through a side exit and escapes with him. The chase begins for a second time. From a distance, Mauricio can only watch as Jim's vehicle disappears. Consumed by rage, he makes up his mind to cross into the United States and hunt them both down. Back in Arizona, Jim stops at his ranch to pack clothes, weapons, and the last of his cash. When he returns to the car, he is shocked to find Miguel gone. The boy has run off, believing Jim might be a bad man. Jim eventually finds him nearby and firmly warns him that the cartel will show no mercy if he is captured. With no other option, Miguel agrees to stay, and they continue their journey toward Chicago. Along the way, Miguel remains silent, leading Jim to assume the boy does not understand what he is saying. At the same time, Mauricio and his men cross the border illegally. Border agents who recognize them as cartel members choose to let them pass out of fear. Once inside the United States, Mauricio heads straight for Jim's property, breaks in, and searches the house. There, he finds an old Marine badge, revealing that Jim is not just a simple rancher, but a former Marine with survival skills and combat experience. After that discovery, Mauricio orders the house to be burned down. Meanwhile, Jim stops at a gas station to refuel and buy a map to Chicago. Without realizing it, paying with his credit card leaves a trail behind. Through the cartel's network in the United States, Mauricio begins tracking their location. While still at the station, Jim calls Sarah and receives devastating news that his ranch has been burned down. Overcome with anger, Jim vents inside the truck until Miguel suddenly responds in English. In that moment, Jim realizes that Miguel has understood everything he has been saying all along. The credit card record from the gas station soon leads Mauricio and his men straight to their location. Without hesitation, Mauricio moves quickly to resume the pursuit of Jim and Miguel. When Mauricio arrives at the gas station, he immediately approaches the cashier and calmly asks about a customer matching Jim's description. He pressures her to reveal where the man went. When she refuses, citing privacy, Mauricio loses his patience. He intimidates her, pulls out a gun, and brutally shoots her before leaving. By reviewing the security camera footage, Mauricio confirms that Jim is heading east. Not long after, Jim's truck breaks down in the middle of the journey. He takes it to the nearest repair shop, only to be told the place is closed for the day. With no other choice, Jim brings Miguel to a nearby diner. There, for the first time, they truly begin to connect. Jim wants to know why the cartel is so determined to hunt Miguel and his late mother. Miguel explains that his uncle stole money from the cartel, and now they are being hunted because of it. When asked about his father, Miguel calmly reveals that his father died before he was born. That night, Jim and Miguel stop at a nearby motel but end up sleeping in the car. The next morning, Jim wakes up in panic when he finds Miguel and his beloved dog, Jackson, missing. His fear fades when Miguel returns with Jackson, having only stepped out briefly to buy food. Relieved, Jim fixes the truck, and they continue their journey. With the map in hand, Jim drives toward Chicago. Yet every credit card payment he makes leaves another trace behind. Once the repair bill is paid, Mauricio and his men quickly pinpoint Jim's location and move to follow him. As the road stretches on, the bond between Jim and Miguel begins to grow. That calm is suddenly shattered when a police car appears behind them and orders them to pull over. The officer approaches Jim, asks for identification, and then questions him about the firearm he is carrying. Jim calmly explains that the weapon is legally registered and offers to show the proper documents. Even so, the officer remains suspicious, intent on confiscating the gun and even questioning Miguel. Despite his discomfort, Jim stays cooperative and follows the instruction to sit in the back seat of the patrol car. Inside the patrol car, Jim notices the officer quietly speaking on his phone. Suspicion starts to grow. Jim realizes this is not a routine stop, but a deliberate attempt to stall while coordinating with the cartel. Convinced the officer is corrupt, Jim steps out and confronts him, questioning what kind of payoff could make him betray his badge. When the officer reaches for his gun, Jackson suddenly lunges. Together, Jim and the dog overpower the officer and knock him unconscious, then escape before Mauricio can arrive and capture them.
Get in the fucking truck!
Not long after, Mauricio and his men reach the scene and are stunned to find the police officer lying unconscious. Mauricio demands to know where Jim went, but the officer is in too much pain to answer. Seeing him as a failure and consumed by rage, Mauricio kills him. While searching the surrounding area, Mauricio accidentally finds the road map Jim bought earlier at the gas station. He takes it as a clue, unaware that Jim and Miguel are watching everything from a distance. Sometime later, Jim stops at a gun store to buy a rifle. He then calls Sarah, who reveals that the man Jim shot at the border was Mauricio's brother. Sarah urges Jim to bring Miguel back to Arizona, but Jim refuses. He chooses to honor his promise to the late Rosa and keep Miguel far away from cartel violence. That night, Jim and Miguel stay at a small motel. In the middle of the night, while taking Jackson outside, Jim spots Mauricio's men lurking around the motel. Panicked, he rushes back inside, wakes Miguel, and calls the police with a fake robbery report to divert attention. He helps Miguel climb out through a window, and they hide in the bushes to avoid being found. Moments later, Mauricio and his men storm the motel room, only to find it empty. Furious, Mauricio shouts threats, vowing that sooner or later he will find Jim and Miguel. Hearing the shouting, Jim tells Miguel to wait in the car while he looks for Jackson. Not long after, Jackson locates Mauricio and, driven by instinct, tries to attack. Mauricio reacts quickly, pulls out his gun, and shoots Jackson dead. The next morning, Jim and Miguel bury Jackson near the motel and mark the grave with simple stones. Afterward, Miguel discovers that Jim has been carrying the cartel's money in the car and accuses him of helping only for the cash. The accusation cuts deep. Hurt and confused, Miguel walks away, but he soon returns. The two reconcile, apologize to each other, and continue their journey. Jim calls Sarah again to explain their situation, but she continues to push him to bring Miguel back to Arizona, insisting the police should handle it. Jim refuses once more. He is determined to deliver Miguel safely to his family in Chicago, ready to face whatever comes, just to keep his promise to Rosa. As Jim and Miguel press on, Mauricio and his men keep searching for leads. Studying the map he found earlier, Mauricio notices a red circle that he believes marks Jim's final destination. Without hesitation, he contacts his cartel network in Chicago and orders them to prepare for Jim and the boys' arrival. Sometime later, Miguel watches Jim practicing his shooting. Noticing the boy's curiosity, Jim brings him along and teaches him how to aim accurately, along with how to take a weapon apart and put it back together. After the training, Miguel expresses a desire to one day kill Mauricio and his men to avenge his mother. Hearing this, Jim firmly corrects him. He reminds Miguel that killing is not something to be proud of, and that his mother's sacrifice was meant to give him a better future. That night, Jim and Miguel take shelter beneath an abandoned overpass. To keep warm, they light a small fire by burning the cartel's money. The cash no longer matters. Survival is all that counts. The next morning, they reach the outskirts of Chicago. While driving on the highway, Jim spots two suspicious men watching them from an overpass. Sensing danger, he turns onto rural roads to throw them off. Even so, a cartel convoy suddenly gives chase. When the car overheats, Jim is forced to stop and fight back with his rifle. Jim and Miguel then escape into a barn, where Jim uses his skills to take down the cartel members one by one. Inside the barn, Mauricio pushes his way in and manages to capture Miguel. He holds a gun to the boy's head and forces Jim to drop his weapon. But Miguel remembers Jim's lesson about removing a magazine and manages to empty the bullets from Mauricio's gun. Jim and Mauricio then clash in a brutal one-on-one fight. Amid the chaos, Miguel briefly grabs a weapon. Mauricio repeatedly provokes him to shoot, but Jim forcefully stops him. He refuses to let Miguel grow up as a killer. In the final moments, Jim shoots Mauricio in the stomach and takes Miguel away. Badly wounded and unable to endure the pain, Mauricio ultimately takes his own life inside the barn. Not long after, Jim and Miguel arrive at the address written on the piece of paper Rosa gave them. When Miguel knocks on the door, his aunt and grandmother welcome him with overwhelming emotion. As Miguel turns to say goodbye, Jim is already gone. Jim later boards a bus to head home. Sitting by the window, holding his injured body, he exhales slowly and closes his eyes. For the first time, he feels a sense of peace, knowing he has safely delivered a child he once did not even know to a place of safety. So the moral of the story is, if a random kid, a bag of cartel cash, and a broken truck suddenly enter your life, congratulations, you are no longer allowed to have a peaceful retirement.